Welcome to the Susan Brender Show. It's all about you, featuring shows on health and wellness, the performing arts, politics, and people who inspire you to be your very best. And now, here's Susan Brender.
This show is brought to you by the Spectrum Firm Incorporated, a helping hand on the FCC highway. The Spectrum Firm specializes in FCC licensing, related engineering, and project management support in the private wireless industry. We offer FCC licensing, engineering support, and related services, including annual programs for license maintenance and renewal services, spectrum analysis, strategy, and frequency management. For more information, call 858-484-8502 at www.thespectrumfirm.com.
I'm Susan Brender, and this is the Susan Brender Show. Today, my guest is Jeanne Beard. Now, Jeanne is an autism thought leader and inspiring keynote speaker. The mission of her organization, which she's going to tell you about, is to encourage, educate, and support parents, families, and caregivers who live, love, and work with those on the autism spectrum to increase understanding and effectiveness. Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about your mission, Jeanne, but I want to introduce you to my audience, and I say welcome to the Susan Brender Show. And, boy, let's really speak about some of the things that you're doing now that are really spending and very productive time helping people. So, one more time, welcome Jeanne Beard to the Susan Brender Show.
Thank you, Susan. I'm really glad to be here.
Well, 1 in 68 U.S. children has an autism spectrum disorder, which is known as ASD. A 30% increase from 1 in 88 2 years ago, according to a new report released Thursday by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Now, what's that all about?
The incidence of autism being diagnosed is definitely increasing. 20 years ago it was 1 in 10,000. So today they're saying 1 in 68, and I've actually heard statistics saying 1 in 45 boys. So I think the numbers are going to continue to increase. They're still doing some research, and we expect that to continue to increase.
What do you attribute it to, Jeanne? Because, years and years ago, you never heard the word autism. Nobody ever heard of it, but you would hear things like person has, and this is not politically correct, but they would talk about retardation. They would talk about somebody being very slow. But this is a very special thing. So there must be something that they can attribute it to. Well,
the cause and cure issues are so hotly debated, and there are so many beliefs. They have ruled out vaccinations as the cause of autism, although I have parents, I talk to dozens of parents a week, and some of them still swear that that's what triggered it. So, the Supreme Court has ruled that vaccinations don't cause autism, but that's still a very big debate. I think there's a lot of factors that are going into it. Improvement in diagnosis is definitely one factor that's increasing the numbers. But I also think, my personal opinion is that part of what it is that we have a name for autism now, which is a neurological disability. It's a neurological difference. It is not a disease. It's not something that needs to be cured. It's not something that's necessarily wrong. It's just a different brain neurology. And I think that there are a lot of factors that may be making that more apparent to us. It may have always been there, but it's more apparent to us. And I think that some of the factors might include our food additives and things like that could be making a contribution. The jury's still out on that piece also. But I definitely think that one of the things from a behavioral standpoint is that the speed of information that we deal with today is completely different than what we dealt with even 10 years ago. When I started my career, when I came out of college in the 80s and I started my career, if we wanted to contact somebody, we wrote a letter and we mailed it to them. And then we called them and followed up. And then if I wanted to quote a client, after a couple of years, there was a fax machine, and then there was email. And now today, if I wanted to quote one of my clients in the business community, if I didn't have the quote in their inbox before we hung up off the phone, I was late. So the speed with which we process information and the amount of information, I mean, we are exposed to so much more information than we were before the internet, before television, before radio, going back into the 1800s. The amount of information that we have to process is so much more than it used to be, and processing information is difficult for people with autism. That's how the social disability develops, is because their neurological processing is operating in a different way, and so they're not gathering that data, that social data. But it's all based on the amount of information and the speed of information, and I think that is one of the contributing factors that's making it stand out more. It's making it more prevalent. We're able to see it.
Yeah, well, Jeanne, let's talk a little bit about the whole word, that word autism, because there's so many different, how do I say this, there's different levels of autism. Some people, you hear them say, well, they have Asperger's. Some people on the autism quote-unquote spectrum have other things wrong with them, and sometimes they can't talk, they don't look you in the eyes, they yell, they scream, all kinds of things. So I want my audience to understand the difference between all facets of autism.
Okay. In 2013, when the DSM-5, which is the diagnostic criteria manual that the psychological community uses to make diagnoses, they changed the criteria for a diagnosis of autism. They eliminated, and I don't think other countries have done this, but in the United States, they have eliminated the diagnosis of Asperger's, and it's probably driven by insurance companies or something, but they've eliminated Asperger's, which is considered to be very high functioning. Someone with Asperger's, you may not even really be aware that they're on the spectrum, except that they're when you ask them to do something, and they might not be very functional, or they might be cranky. These might have been the kids that we called oppositional defiant before. We called these people, just mean or bullies or whatever. But so they changed the criteria and they lumped Asperger's under the umbrella autism spectrum disorder. So everybody from the very lowest functioning person, so from someone that has very severe impact of autism and maybe cognitive delays, and is not able to be left alone perhaps because they're self-injurious, or they could start a fire, or be in danger physically. So all the way from that very low functioning end to the highest functioning end, and the highest functioning end could include Bill Gates. He's reported to be on the autism spectrum, and he did okay in life. So if we look at the spectrum, everybody was lumped under one umbrella called autism spectrum disorder, and they've now given it levels 1, 2, and 3. Level 1 requiring support, level 2 requiring a lot of support, and level 3, I can't exactly remember what the language is, but it was, as you increase 1, 2, 3, it's how much support is required. So that was all changed. But the thing about autism is that while there's one thing that these people all have in common, this neurological processing difference, the way that affects every person is different, and these are still individuals. These are still people with needs and desires and lives and thoughts and feelings and experiences and personalities, and some are introverted and some are extroverted, and some are brave and some are not brave, and just like everyone else. So that creates, autism is something that I sort of relate it to like left-handedness. If you had a group of left-handed people, they could be as different as can be and all have that one trait in common. And the same thing is true with autism. They can be as different as can be and have that one thing in common.
I want to tell you a little story, Jeannie, because this was my experience with kids with autism. I still know a woman who is very interested in working with kids with autism. Now, let me start and explain how that happened. Apparently, she had a friend whose daughter had very severe autism on the spectrum. And this young woman, she couldn't talk. She used her computer to use as a vehicle to speak, and she, she yelled out. She was very weird and very difficult to work with. But my friend, Alethea Vasilis, who's a wonderful, wonderful person, decided that she wanted to help her and stay with her and give the mother and father respite. So what did she do? She took this girl to a farm, and that's her father's farm, an organic farm. And she said to the girl, she said, touch this. And what she was asking her to touch was a little seed. And she said, now plant it, put it in the ground. Well, the girl, the minute she touched the ground, she lit up. Her face lit up. She had a really wonderful smile on her face. And Alethea realized that this young woman could do something with these little seeds. So she started a particular farm. And now the farm has 100 young people who are planting seeds, who are selling tomatoes and various veggies, and they also live on the ground. And she raised money to put all kinds of little houses for these young people with autism. Now, I think that's remarkable, and I think it's a great thing. Have you ever seen or have you ever done anything that you think is a very important thing, effective for people with autism?
That's an awesome story, and it's exciting to hear when people with autism are finding places in the world that are fulfilling and make them happy and help them to lead functional lives. So that's an awesome story, and we hear more and more of those kinds of stories all the time. What we do at the National Autism Academy, and what my mission is to educate people to help them understand that autism is not retardation, and to help parents in particular understand how their child's mind works, how it works differently, so that they can learn how to motivate their child, they can learn how to understand some of these behaviors, they can help to reduce those outbursts and those meltdowns. I think meltdown is a pretty well-known and well-understood term for parents of children with autism or families. And so that's where we're doing our work, is trying to help parents who have kids particularly in areas where there is not other support, because everything we do is done online and by phone and Skype and that kind of thing. So, we're trying to help parents understand their children, and we find that as soon as there's greater understanding, there's a more relaxed environment. There's less stress and less worry, and the situation begins to improve as the parents learn how to parent their child in a way that is positive, and they may be very similar to some of the things that your friend was doing with her kids on the farm.
Now, let me ask you something. The National Autism Academy, let's talk about that a little bit. Now, if I don't want to talk about me particularly, but if there is somebody who decides to call the Autism Academy, take us through the process. How does it all work out for them?
Yeah. Well, if you call us, you'll get us. I mean, you'll get, if we're on the phone with someone else, you might get a message, but we will call you back. What we do most of our work through an online portal. So we have a beautiful website. We have a lot of free resources on our website. So there's a whole section of free support and information, things to help you understand the situation or what you're dealing with and how to work with your child better. Lots of educational tools. We have a number of free webinars on our website and that type of thing. Our flagship training, which we call Essential Parenting Guidance, and it would do just as well for a teacher or someone else who's trying to work with a child on the spectrum, but we target more parents at this point. And that training, if you come into our website and you register for our training, as soon as you pay the fee, you do get immediate access to 10 hours of recorded information, all recorded by Dr. Tim Wahlberg, who's our clinical expert. He's got 25 years in the trenches working with families. And so we basically are taking his process of helping families in his office and making it more available to people who don't have access to quality therapy for their kids. And it's very different than ABA therapy. We're not actually doing therapy with kids. We are actually training parents to do therapy, to do their own therapy with kids. And I think that's been the missing link for so long. Parents are left on the outskirts while their son or daughter, works with a therapist for an hour. They sit in the waiting room or they sit behind a mirror and they watch. They're not being trained, so they can't carry on at home. So what we're teaching parents is how to take what the therapist is doing in that 1 hour and take it home and stretch it out and make it a lot more, have a lot more impact on the child, because it can now be 24/7 instead of an hour a week.
Now, the parents must be dealing with so many frustrations associated with autism, and they're also probably very confused, because after a while they kind of have to question, how do they have a successful child who can, say, go to school or to be with other kids or to, do anything that they want. The frustrations must be huge. Is that true? And are you able to? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, there are a lot of it is an emotional roller coaster. One of the important pieces that is part of our training is understanding the parent experience and managing the parent experience. Because if we're, as a parent, if we're trying to work with our child and we're angry and we're frustrated and we're confused and we're frightened because what are we going to do and how is our kid ever going to be okay and how are they going to live in the future, and we're anxious and stressed and impatient, and that is not the parent that's going to, that being in that place is not going to create the kind of outcomes that our children need. Our children need us to be solid and steady and strong and patient and persistent and able to keep up, be very consistent. And that's not easy, not when you've got a job and a house and 3 other kids and, a lot of other, ailing parents or whatever, and you have a lot of responsibilities. So one of the things that we do talk a lot about is the parent experience and how do we manage our own thoughts and how do we stay hopeful and how do we stay strong, because there is a lot of hope for our kids. So many of our kids can go on and have very, very wonderful, happy, functional, productive lives. They may not have 2.5 kids and live in the suburb in a 2,000 square foot house in the suburbs with a minivan and a dog. That may not be that may not be the lifestyle that they choose, and that that's fine. If we can open up our hearts as parents and as as a community, as sort of as a culture, if we can be a little bit more flexible and realize the lives of people with autism may look different. They may make different choices. They may not choose to get married, or they may choose never to take on property, or whatever it is that they decide. Their life may look different than what we think of as the American dream. And if they're happy and functional, then, that's great. That's really what matters. So what we're trying to do is help parents help their children be happy and functional and help the parents be at peace with wherever their child is. And
Jeanne, I wish I didn't have so many stories to tell, but I want to share this with you, and I want to share this with my audience. I have a very, very dear friend in California whose son has been diagnosed with Asperger's. Now, I've spent time with him over the years. Needless to say, he's my very close friend's son. And what I noticed was that at the beginning, when he was very young, he was very wild. He was very frustrated and very scared, a lot of anxiety. And years passed, a lot of years passed, and now he's an adult. But the fascinating and the most wonderful thing is that when he was with other people, he just couldn't relate to them. He was very uncomfortable with with people who were quote unquote normal. So what happened was somehow he was very bright. He became interested in comedy. That was his out, if you want to say that. So he went down in Los Angeles to the comedy club, and sure enough, he found his way to getting the kind of feeling that he should have had when he was young. It's called hope. It's called familiarity and comfort. Yeah. And the people at the comedy club treated him like he was a quote-unquote normal person, and now they're some of his best friends. It's the most wonderful thing. And I can tell you, Jeanne, that my friend is like she's amazed. To watch her son, who went from being really, really difficult to take care of, now he's on his own. He goes to the comedy club. All of the people there take him. They drive him. They do everything for him. And it's just so wonderful.
Yeah, awesome. And so he's one of the success stories. He's one of those people that has found his way in life. And there is a lot of research going on about performance as a therapy, theater as therapy for people with autism. And there are people that believe that it's wonderful because it's as if you're teaching the person to act like a normal person. And I don't mean that to be derogatory, but all of the things that they're missing when they're learning to act, then they can begin to, that's a skill that they can begin to apply and act, the way other people are acting. And it's not driven by the same social desire, but it helps them be comfortable in the world and to be functional in the world and to be able to get out in the world. So it's awesome. And there are a lot of kids. My son I have a 21-year-old son. He's very, very into comedy. He is always laughing hysterically. I was thinking the other day, had a few friends over, and all of a sudden this hysterical laughter is coming from my basement, and I can hear. And so they're always laughing down there, and that is people with autism can be very funny. They can be very charming and delightful and wonderful. And you're right about the anxiety piece. They say at least 75% of people with autism are struggling with anxiety at some level. So he found that the theater and being on stage was a perfect way for him to manage himself. So that's
you didn't
awesome.
Tell our audience your son has autism. Is that correct?
Yes, I have a 21-year-old son on the spectrum, right. Mm-hmm.
So that said, you're taking your experience and applying it to the mission of the National Autism Academy. Am I correct?
I am, and I was really blessed when my son was first diagnosed after, going through, as many parents do, after going through 10 different therapists and not finding anyone that could help with autism because nobody knew anything about it. I finally found a man named Dr. Tim Wahlberg, who is the founder and clinical director of the Prairie Clinic in Geneva, Illinois, and he is awesome and he taught me a great deal. And through working with him with my son and asking him questions and writing things down, and then I said, I need this in writing. I need to read it. And he said, well, I'm trying to write a book, but I see kids from 9 a.m. till 9 p.m., and I really don't have time. So he had all these notes. I said, well, give me all your notes. And I was reading his notes and listening to his presentations and going to his presentations and talking to him all the time. And eventually I outlined his notes and then talked back and forth with him to fill places in so I would understand things. And that eventually became his book that he published. So I got a world-class education from someone who spends 12 hours a day, 5 days a week, working with kids on the autism spectrum. So that is how I learned so much. And so the programs that we deliver from the National Autism Academy are all clinically based in Dr. Wahlberg's work, and he is on our staff as our clinical expert. And so everything that we publish, we run through him and he approves for us so that we are clinically accurate. But everything's wrapped kind of in the experience of someone who's been there, done that. And that's really nice for parents because a lot of these therapists, they have great, theoretical knowledge and they may know a lot of things, but they haven't lived through it. And so
that's right.
when someone says to me, geez, I want to cry, I go, yeah, I get you. I know exactly where you're coming from. Here's what I did when I got in that place. Here's a suggestion of what you might do.
It's interesting to listen to you, Jeannie, because I'm thinking what would be really fine and really productive and helpful to parents would be if they had support groups. Can they do that through your online company or organization?
Yeah, we have a couple of different support groups. We have one that's like a membership thing where you can just be part of it and pay a fee, to be part of this ongoing support group, and it's a nominal thing. And then we have a very active support group for our students and graduates. It's a private Facebook group where people who've already been through our trainings can communicate with each other, find accountability partners, find people, people go in and say, my son's chewing on everything, I can't find anything that's working, what has everybody else used? And other parents will chime in, I did this and I solved that problem this way, and this is, So we have these two different sort of venues for support in that respect, yeah.
I hear you. Now, the last question I think, which is incredibly important, is what about schools? What about education? Do schools understand how to take care of people if you mainstream them, for example, or if you even have a special ed class? Do they understand? Do they get education from their colleges or from wherever they learn to do what they are doing?
Yeah. Unfortunately, probably not nearly enough. And that is not, I'm not trying to say something negative about the school system or about teachers, because God bless them, I wouldn't want to be in a room full of kids all day. But unfortunately the educational system has not the college level and postgraduate level system is not caught up to the need for therapists and teachers, et cetera, with autism. I talked to someone who got their master's, about a year and a half ago, and I said, how much time did you talk about master's in social work? So she's now has a practice doing therapy with families. I said, how much time did you spend learning about autism? She said, about 45 minutes. I said, Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? So even today, many, postgraduate trainings don't have the right kind of training for professionals. And so that means that there's a lack of professionals in the field that really have experience in training and know what to do. There are a lot of ABA therapists, and that seems to be spreading, but that's very different than, sort of the type of work that we're doing. ABA is something that's done mostly with younger kids, and it's a terrific foundation, but it's not going to give a lot of the support. We talk about developing executive functioning and doing, being proactive in terms of teaching your child to be able to function in the world, and so we're a little bit different than that. Yeah, so we do have on slate for 2018 a professional training. Dr. Wahlberg is going to be leading a professional training for therapists, people who are already in practice, who have their licenses and their degrees and whatnot, and he's going to lead a training teaching them how to work with kids on the spectrum.
Oh, that's very exciting,
he's awesome
Jeanne.
at it.
It really is awesome. Now, if people want to get in touch with you, they want to take some of the groups that you've been talking about and get the help that you offer from your organization, how do they do that?
My first advice would be go to our website, www.nationalautismacademy.com. And if you look around a little bit, I think at the bottom of the landing page there's a place that says email us. So you can email me. You can get the free resources. The tabs across the top will show free resources. You can take the free resources, any of them that you like. You can look at the online trainings there. There's several choices for online trainings, and register for those trainings. If you do register for almost any training, you'll probably hear from me at some point. I try to reach out to every student that I can.
Well, today my guest has been Jeanne Beard, and she's the head of autism, and we'll call it the National Autism Academy. So if you want to really get the kind of help and the kind of hope that you need when you're raising somebody with a disability such as autism, she's the one to go to. So thank you so much, Jeanne Beard, for being on the Susan Brender Show, and come on back and give us some of the great stories, which I'm sure you're going to have in the future.
Oh, thanks, Susan. I appreciate it. Happy holidays.
Well, to you too, Jeanne.
This has been brought to you by Megger, a company that has been serving the electrical test and measurement industry for over 100 years.
Thank you for listening to The Susan Brender Show. To be a guest, email sebrender@yahoo.com.